I know, but you can't. I know you're excited to be here. I'm excited to be here. It's messy to be alive. All right. So, okay. You all know who I am, but if you don't know who I am out there, my name is Rita, Rev Rita, and you are at Center for Spiritual Living Kauai. We have a couple announcements before we start, as usual. And first and most important, on Saturday, the kids in arts program will be doing their final presentation and letting everybody know what they've been doing for the last 6 weeks. So we would appreciate it if anybody can come out and support them. That would be really great. So that, and then it's at 11 a.m. on Saturday. It'll last about an hour. And then right here at CSL Kauai. And then on Sunday, we are having a visioning session. Dr. Peggy will lead our congregation, whoever wants to stay, in a visioning for the center and its forward growth. And she will explain what a visioning is. I'm not going to do it right now, but it's basically catching Spirit's vision for what's next for CSL Kauai. All right, so that'll be happening. And then Reverend Diane Decker, who is right here, is doing a workshop, the Empath's Survival Guide by Judith Orloff, right? Yeah, it looks like a really exciting workshop. The book is in the bookstore. I'm going to order more. But that will be on May 8th, Wednesday, and then the 15th. So we got stuff going on. There will be more stuff during the month, but we're not going to overload you right now. All right, so without further ado, I am going to introduce the woman of the evening, Rose Anne Jones.
Thank you, aloha. Oh, gosh, thanks for coming out tonight. And I just want to say, yes, I'm Rose Anne, and I am a practitioner here at Center for Spiritual Living, Kauai. How many of you are familiar with Mark Nepo or have read his books? Or how many have never heard of him and don't know anything? Well, I know you know something, but great. Great. I hope this gives you a good introduction to Mark and his amazing life and his amazing writings. So we're going to start with one of his quotes. I want to affirm how rare and magnificent and messy it is to be alive. Mark Nepo, poet on a spiritual journey. And I think that's what is very interesting about Mark is that, I mean, how many poets do you know ended up on the New York Times bestseller list, #1 bestseller? Like 0? Do you know any poets that have done that? English major? So that's pretty unusual. Well, it did happen, and many of his books since then have been bestsellers also. One of the things, I'll just tell you the little secret about it. Blessings to whatever's happening on the outside there. That Mark had a visit from Oprah, who invited him on her show. And that's what happened. And I just realized I was supposed to start off with a little invocation. So let's do that before I go any further. Thank you. So I'm just going to close my eyes. And what I do know is that there is only one power, one force in the universe. And we are all united by that force. It's working in and through me. It's working in and through each of us. And what I do know is that by using the power that's within us, we can change our lives. So what I know is that this program is going to unroll perfectly, and that I hope that everything that's said here and your understanding of Mark Nepo and his sensitive poetry and lyrical phrasing in his prose is something that reaches your heart. So knowing this, I just release my word into the law, and as we affirm together. And so it is. Okay. I have always thought in metaphors. So as a child, he said that he always thought in metaphors. And I'm going to start off by sharing something that's on Audible. I have his books on Audible, which means you can hear his voice. And the great thing about his voice, as I get to the right place, is that it's so wonderful to hear an author speak in their own voice. And they know what they wrote. They know what they felt. And so listen to this and enjoy.
September 23rd. Repetition is not failure. Repetition is not failure. Ask the waves, ask the leaves, ask the wind. There's no expected pace for inner learning. What we need to learn comes when we need it. No matter how old or young, no matter how many times we have to start over, no matter how many times we have to learn the same lesson, we fall down as many times as we need to learn how to fall and get up. We fall in love as many times as we need to learn how to hold and be held. We misunderstand the many voices of truth as many times as we need to truly hear the choir of diversity that surrounds us. We suffer our pain as often as is necessary, so we can learn how to break and how to heal. No one really likes this, of course, but we deal with our dislike in the same way, again and again, until we learn what we need to know about the humility of acceptance. For your meditation, sit quietly and bring to mind one learning that keeps returning to you. It might be about giving yourself away repeatedly, or your struggle to trust, or about a particular way you hurt others repeatedly. Sit quietly, and as you breathe, try not to resist what this recurring piece of life is trying to teach you. Sit quietly, and as you breathe, see yourself as a shore, and this recurring piece of life as a wave whose job is to make you smooth.
Just giving you a moment to feel that. Beloved, as a poet, teacher, and storyteller, Nepo has been named one of the finest spiritual guides of our time, a consummate storyteller, and an eloquent spiritual teacher. He's published 20 books and recorded 14 audio projects. His books have been translated into more than 20 languages. In 2016, Watkins Mind, Body, and Spirit named him one of the 100 most spiritually influential living people. You know, I can't tell you, but I saw the quote, so I'm giving it to you. So here's a grouping of his books, and many of you who know Mark Nepo probably were acquainted with him from the Book of Awakening, which is a day book. His newest book, just published, More Together Than Alone. And we have 3 copies tonight, and it's because it's in hardcover. They're normally $27, but as a special for tonight, they're $20 if you're interested. So Mark says, over 30 years ago, I almost died from cancer. That raw and vulnerable journey tossed me into an urgent community of loved ones and kind strangers. I experienced the power and the spirit of community. In 2010, Oprah promoted Mark Nepo's Book of Awakening, which launched it onto the #1 spot on the New York Times bestseller list. Since then, he has frequently appeared on her Super Soul Sunday program. 2 weeks ago? Oops, sorry. Okay, today, Nepo lives in Kalamazoo, Michigan with his wife Susan and their dog, Zuzu. Now, why do you think I have a picture of Western Michigan University there next to Zuzu? That's where I went to college. Go Broncos! Yeah, it's in Kalamazoo. Yes, and it is, I spent 5 years there. I love that town. Grew up a lot living there. And spent a year after college living there, but working as a social worker in Battle Creek, Michigan. Mark Nepo was born in 1951 from Russian Jewish parentage in Brooklyn, New York, and grew up on Long Island. Although he was born after World War II ended, some of his extended family were killed in the Holocaust. His family grieved their loss, and he learned at an early age that life was precious and could quickly be taken away. Nepo applied himself in school and eventually earned a doctorate in English. And I have to add that I was an English major too, so that just is so exciting for me and somebody else in this crowd. He taught for 18 years at the State University of New York in Albany. In his 30s, though, when he was teaching there, he was diagnosed with a rare form of lymphoma. His prognosis was grim, and his life expectancy limited to a handful of years. And I would like to quote our Reverend Patrick, unless Reverend Patrick would like to do his own quoting. But would you like to do it? Okay. So, Reverend Patrick, when he goes to the doctor, he says, "You can give me a diagnosis, but do not give me a prognosis. I will decide that on my own." So Nepo's struggle with cancer propelled him to search religions and read philosophers for wisdom. He practiced meditation, going within for answers, and he vowed to experience his remaining life fully. Surviving his cancer, Nepo wrote, "This is the medicine of poetry, that through raw and honest reflection, we deepen our conversation with life." The purpose of poetry and expression is to make life real, to remove everything that gets in the way, and to help us live. He recently wrote, "Over 30 years ago, I almost died from cancer. That raw and vulnerable journey tossed me into an urgent community of loved ones and kind strangers. Without their care, I wouldn't be here. I experienced the power and spirit of community." He goes on to say, "There are certain experiences that reform us, as if God is a tireless blacksmith who, against our pleading, forges the metal in us, though it takes years for our heart and mind to cool from the pounding." My journey with cancer was how I was forged. Becoming vulnerable and embracing the potential of feeling vulnerable is the starting point to understanding ourselves. And as you know, if you come here regularly, we talk a lot about vulnerability and Brene Brown, and it's just really important to be able to express all the emotions in our lives, right? Whether it's joy, glee, excitement, but also those other emotions of sadness and grief and feeling vulnerable. Whatever opens us is never as important as what opens. It was 10 years after surviving cancer that I began to wonder about the lineage of human beings working well together. And so I began to collect stories, both contemporary and historical, searching for the lessons in them that we can rely on today. So here is one of his stories. A widower made his way to ask a wise old woman about his troubles. The old woman received him, and they walked along a stream. She could see the pain in his face. He began to tremble as he asked, "What's the point? Is there any meaning to life?" She invited him to sit on a large stone near the stream. She took a long branch and swirled it in the water, then replied, "It all depends on what it means to you to be alive." In his sorrow, the man dropped his shoulders, and the old woman gave him the branch. "Go on," she said, "touch the branch to the water." As he poked the branch in the running stream, there was something comforting about feeling the movement of the water in his hand through the branch. She touched his hand and said, "You see that you can feel the water without putting your hand in the water. That is what meaning feels like." The troubled man seemed puzzled. She said, "Close your eyes and feel your wife now gone. That you can feel her in your heart without being able to touch her. This is how meaning saves us." The widower began to cry. The old woman put her arm around him. "No one knows how to live or how to die. We only know how to love and how to lose and how to pick up branches of meaning along the way." And this is one of his poems. "All things reveal the whole. Through one rounded shell, the depth of the ocean. Through one determined bee, the entirety of spring. Through one lift of care, the long history of kindness. Through one voice speaking beyond its fear, the tidal wave of courage. Through one firm encouragement, the bedrock of all worth. Through one nail hammered, the hope of all repair. So pick up anything particular and love it till it lets go its secret. That each thing is a stitch in the golden net of existence. And every chip of bark and screw and broken timber, every feather, stone, and bubble on the sea, every loss and gain in where we think we're going only brings back to why we're here, to be a stitch in the golden net." Let the miracles, even the ones we don't want to see, unfold. Ron, could you pass around the quotes? And I thought I'd give each of you a chance to take a quote out of the basket and read the quote. My assistant. Did you want the other mic? No. Loosen up. Oh, and turn it on, please. Michelle knows how to do that.
When feeling a splinter, we must, while trying to remove it, remember there is a body that is not splinter, and a spirit that is not splinter, and a world that is not splinter.
And Michelle, or whoever is reading it, if you have any thoughts about the quote, feel free to add them.
Nope, I'm good.
Each person is born with an unencumbered spot, free of expectation and regret, free of ambition and embarrassment, free of fear and worry, an umbilical spot of grace where we were each first touched by God. Oh, it is this spot of grace that issues peace. Psychologists call this spot the psyche. Theologians call it the soul. Jung calls it the seat of the unconscious. Hindu masters call it Atman. Buddhists call it the Dharma. Rilke calls it inwardness. Sufis call it Kalb. And Jesus calls it the center of our love.
I have two. My friends are the beings through whom God loves me. Very true. And since I have two, that was very short. Yes. My friends are the beings through whom God loves me. And my other little quick phrase is, and that's very true for me too, whatever opens us is not as important as what it opens.
And if any of you choose not to read the quote, that's fine too. Nobody's forced into that.
The flower doesn't dream of the bee, it blossoms and the bee comes. I love it.
Oh, that could be a love song.
That could be a love song. Got a long one. Here we go. The heart doesn't know it's expanding with compassion any more than a hawk spreading its wings knows it's being a hawk. Nor does someone acting out of love often realize they are being kind.
Like white blood cells rushing to the site of an injury, people in the modern world are gathering around different injuries to help heal each other.
Well, that's a perfect quote for you, Miss Medical. We may spend much of our time unaware and unenlightened, yet the presence of truth and God, like a deep and ancient friend, can shape our entire lives. So, something.
We're all one gesture from being the cruelty we have suffered, or one kindness from helping each other heal in the open.
I tried so hard to please that I never realized no one is watching.
Oh, that's a good one.
Read that again.
I tried so hard to please that I never realized no one is watching.
No matter the devastation, there's a resilience within us to rebuild whatever has been destroyed.
There are no wrong turns. only unexpected paths. And boy, am I an example of that.
Does it say that?
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that, but that's certainly a reflection of my life.
The inner task becomes, how do we make a lasting friendship with the unities that are larger than us? How do we keep their light in our heart when no stars appear in sight? The inner task becomes, how do we make a lasting friendship with the unities that are larger than us? How do we keep their light in our heart when no stars appear in sight?
So light is in both the broken bottle and the diamond. Wasn't that working? Hello? Light is in both the broken bottle and the diamond.
When we heal ourselves, we heal the world. For as the body is only as healthy as its individual cells, the world is only as healthy as its individual souls.
All the great spiritual leaders have challenged us to let the world pass through our heart. Another name for love.
The pain of life is pure salt, no more, no less. The amount of pain in life remains the same, exactly the same. But the amount of bitterness we taste depends on the container we put the pain in. So, when you are in pain, the only thing you can do is to enlarge your sense of things. Stop being a glass, become a lake.
Thank you.
The bee. You want to hear some more of Mark talking?
Honeycombs and thinking strings. My body needs strength so I can hear my thinking strings, said Grandfather Mantis while eating honeycombs. This declaration is from a South African tale in which Grandfather Mantis needs to hear his thinking strings in order to figure out how to keep the aging sun up in the sky. Embedded in this moment is an entire philosophy of life and a description of how one form of life renews another in a mystical chain of being that keeps the world going. Honoring these connections can renew us when we feel too tired to go on. The story unfolds as the creatures begin to miss the sun's warmth, only to discover that the aging sun is tiring from its daily path across the sky. They turn to Grandfather Mantis for a solution since he has a gift for surviving. Now, Grandfather Mantis realizes that in order to think clearly, his body needs strength, and for that to happen, he needs nourishment. So he takes his sandal and slaps it to the earth, at which moment the sandal becomes a dog that runs straight away to retrieve honeycombs for Grandfather Mantis to eat. Eating the honeycomb strengthens his body, which enables him to hear his thinking strings. That his thoughts come to him through thinking strings implies that ideas are retrieved, not created. Refreshed and strong, Grandfather Mantis listens and then charges all the creatures to lift the tiring sun at dawn just before it wakes and to give it a boost up into the highest sky. They all do this, and once aloft, the sun is carried by the higher current back and forth across the sky until its warmth is again available to all. Within this story, the immediate remedy for a waning life force resides in the trust that each part of life affects all the others, and that each part has a role to play in keeping the other parts well and functioning. The underlying secret to releasing that remedy seems to be the realization that no living thing is the sole author of its vitality. Life force flows from one living thing to another. So when feeling weary and out of sorts, the first thing we can do is to see where our connecting points to life are dislodged. This is no different than checking if the plug is cleanly in the socket when the lamp begins to flicker. A reflective pause. Journal questions.
Okay, hold on a minute.
Describe the last honeycombs and thinking strings.
Okay, we're going to the next one.
My body needs strength so I can hear my... The story reveals some fundamental understandings about what is nourishing, how we think, and how we stay warm and lighted. In order to think clearly, Grandfather Mantis eats honeycombs. Now, honey itself is that sweet thickness produced by bees from the nectar of flowers. Thousands of bees belonging to a hive gather the nectar from thousands of flowers blooming in spring. They then bring that nectar back to the hive, where in the center they create honey. In the center of the hive, they store the honey in an amazingly thin-walled honeycomb that they construct of beeswax. Elsewhere in the honeycomb, the larvae of unborn bees are incubated. So when Grandfather Mantis eats honeycombs to strengthen his body and think clearly, he is eating this entire process. He is eating the flowers breaking ground on the other side of winter, and the nectar forming in the heart of every flower. He is eating the search of 1,000 bees scenting after the nectar, and they're bringing it back to the center of the hive. He is eating the mysterious way they turn that nectar into honey, and the hive's industry at turning their wax into a honeycomb. He is surrendering to the fact that in order to be strong and clear, we need to internalize the unending way that the variety of life is tripped upon and gathered and worked into one thick sweetness. It is the strength gained from taking such wholeness in that allows Grandfather Mantis to hear his thinking strings. Just as the Greek Aeolian harp was placed on the top of a mountain till music was revealed by the wind moving through its strings, this South African tale suggests that the mind doesn't really originate thoughts, but places itself in the open so the larger forces can play our mind's strings. Like Grandfather Mantis, our job is to hear the thoughts and insights plucked on our thinking strings. This tale implies a way of life that involves taking in how the world works in order to be strong enough to hear the forces of life pluck our thinking strings and make music in our minds. And all toward what end? Nothing less than keeping the sun in its course across the sky. We need everything and everyone to keep everything going. By helping each other, we can re-enter the strongest currents of life and be carried along. This is how the parts keep the universe whole, and how the whole keeps the parts vital. All this is embedded in these two lines from a South African tale. Both astonishing and affirming, it suggests that what nourishes, strengthens, and warms us comes through us, not from us. How we live our lives evolves very differently if we accept this premise. All this has implications for how we listen, love, and live. Of course, it's not as simple in our daily lives. Unlike Grandfather Mantis, we can't have someone else engage in all the processes of life and simply imbibe the result. We have to experience these processes ourselves. That's what eating the honeycombs really means. And if the world works this way, then listening is more a matter of letting things enter and combine than sorting and analyzing. And loving is more a matter of being a conduit than a mirror. And living is more a matter of keeping everything connected than fending off life with our will. With this in mind, the story uncovers a set of self-reflective questions. Have we endured and faced our pain? Have we softened that pain till it forms a nectar in our heart? Have we offered it up? Have we shared it with others or kept it to ourselves? Have we searched for the pain softened in others? Have we turned what we've been given through friendship and love into honey? Have we worked our experience into a honeycomb in which to carry the sweetness we've distilled? Have we eaten what we've earned or just looked at it? Have we used the strength that comes from all this to place ourselves in the open so the larger forces can find us? Can we hear what moves through our thinking strings? Have we interpreted that music well? These are not easy tasks. Is it any wonder we need each other to make it through? So if you're willing, I may turn to you when stuck or sputtering, to see if I've retreated into that stubborn belief that we're the sole authors of what we need. If you're willing, we can slap each other's sandals till they become dogs that will retrieve the sweetness we've misplaced. If you're willing, we can help each other put the sun back into the sky. A reflective pause. A meditation. Place some honey on a plate and sit in the sun if you can. Breathe deeply and center yourself. Inhale slowly and remember that when Grandfather Mantis eats
Well, he's passing out a taste of honey. Wait until everybody gets one, and then I'll continue his suggestions for tasting it and feeling and thinking about all that went into to make that taste of honey. By the way, this is Dr. Doobie's organic honey. Oh, snap. I'm glad to see that you're all being patient until the honey is passed out to everyone. Kind of. Ready?
The honeycomb. He is taking in everything that created the honeycomb. Exhale fully and lift some honey on your finger. Close your eyes and eat the honey from your finger. As you taste the honey, remember that the word sage means to taste. As you taste the honey, know you are taking in the nectar that formed in the heart of every flower. As the sweetness coats your throat, know you are taking in the search of 1,000 bees scenting the nectar and bringing it back to the center of their hives. Inhale deeply and know you are taking in the mysterious way that nectar is turned into honey. Open your eyes, knowing that you carry a timeless sweetness. As you enter your day, be ready to gently kiss something or someone along the way.
Another poem. Authority of Being. The sun doesn't stop shining because some of us are blind. The birds don't stop singing because some of us are deaf. The heart doesn't stop loving because some of us are afraid. What lets the flower in the forest bloom, though no one is watching? Inside everything. Keep trying to hide, and in time, you become a wall. Keep trying to love, and in time, you become love. Our journey on earth is to stop hiding so we can become love. Everything else is a seduction and a distraction. Courage is staying true. Mark Nepo. So that is my presentation. Do any of you have some thoughts of, because I know that you are very familiar with Mark's work. Would you like to express anything?
Hi, I'm Amber, for those who don't know it. Many years ago, of 1966, I met a remarkable poet. And it was the depth of the poetry that softened my heart and opened up his. I've been married to him for over 50 years. And he was a marvelous poet. I haven't come across anybody who has touched me as unexpectedly and deeply as Mark Nepo. When I first read his books, I was sitting in Barnes & Noble in San Diego, and I started reading his work. And the poetry so opened me up into areas that I hadn't experienced for many, many years. and I love poetry. I used to have an art gallery, and when a client would buy a painting, I would have my husband immediately on the spot write a poem. And these poems were so meaningful to so many, many people. He also was an English teacher like Mark. I saw Mark on Oprah years ago, and I think him and Oprah were sitting in Maui at her farm, and there was such a back and forth connection of spirit between the two of them. It wasn't just an interview. It was two hearts opening up to each other. And to witness this was a great, profound experience. She since has used him many, many times to lead workshops, to put him on the TV, and of course promoted his books. There's some I don't have, but I've given many away, and I feel that he is the Khalil Gibran of America. I love him.
Clearly. Thank you for bringing up the Khalil Gibran. How many people have read his work? And at 18, his book, The Prophet, changed my life. It opened me up to a different way of thinking from what I was brought up with. And so inclusive and so much part of what we teach here at Center for Spiritual Living. And also, I think sometimes of Mark Nepo as being a bit of a roomie also. So, no?
Is there a lot of bees in Kalamazoo? Kalamazoo?
It's from South Africa. No. Yes, I lived in Kalamazoo for 5 years, and there were bees and there were mosquitoes. It's actually sort of a rural part of Michigan. Kalamazoo has what's the population in Kalamazoo now? Her daughter lives in Kalamazoo, but it's a great town, but it's Western Michigan, so that's much more rural than the Detroit area. So yes, bees are everywhere, and that's a whole other story. We all have concerns about the health of the bees all over the world.
What resonated for me deeply was when you gave the talk on Sunday. I could feel, it was like, well, I'd never heard of Mark Nepo, I'd never read Mark Nepo, and just from what you shared in your oh-so-tasty little come to my class, and in fact, my whole life turned around in order for me to be here tonight. I had a commitment that was 2 months old that just disappeared when this came on the span. But I want to say what touched me most deeply, because I'd like to call forth friendships that are in support of that. I'd like to be an ally in support of that in others, and I would love to have others support me in that as well. And that's the piece that Michelle read. It was the first thing that I opened to when I got the book. And you mentioned it again today, and Michelle read it, and it's the recognition I've had from my own spiritual experiences that when I go out the back of my Sacred Heart, I can rest into larger and larger hold-ons of who I am, right? And if I'm in one of the small ones, like my ego, the salt in that place is just almost too bitter to take, right? And so that it's almost counterintuitive. Right at the moment when it's hurting is the moment to take a breath and trust and go back into a bigger self. So I'm actually vulnerably putting it out because that's who I choose to be, who I want to be, and I want to show up as an ally for that with my sisters and brothers as well. So if you catch me in a moment of contraction or tightness or smallness of being, I would invite you to invite me into the next larger aspect of myself.
Anyone else? Well, I hope that you enjoyed and got something good out of this, something sweet. And know that Mark Nepo and other poets can go places that most writers don't go and can't go in the same way, is using that lyrical form, whether it's regular poetry or lyrical prose. That's when they can get into the heart. They get into the pain and the joy in all sides of life. And it's a very special way of writing. Yeah.
I was one of the ones that said in between where I had heard about him. And actually, one of the books that came up when you had all the different books we read for practitioner, but I had totally forgot it until it popped up on the screen. But my question is, the first time I really heard about him was the CSL on the mainland, and they had a whole section with all his books. Is he active in Center for Spiritual Livings in any way that you know, or does he go and speak at them? Like, what's his connection with CSL?
Well, I don't know that he is active in CSL particularly, but obviously that his message resounds in all of the new thought kinds of thinking, philosophies. And Reverend Rita or Reverend Patrick can talk about what, that Mark Nepo does visit different communities around the country. He does tours, and he's going to be at...
But our Reverend James, our mentor, is starting a show called The Interview. And Mark Nepo is his first guest. And it's going to be live, and it will be accessible. I don't have the information yet. And then he's also doing a workshop, which will possibly be able to be viewed online too, but I don't know yet. But I'll make sure we find out. But he is his actual first guest on that interview that he's doing. What? It's in Los Angeles. Yeah, so that's cool.
I looked that up. I believe the date is at the end of June. And he speaks around the country to all sorts of groups. So, yeah.
There's a website. I am on his website. If I'm not loud enough, there is a website, and marknepo.com, and it talks of his upcoming places and things he's going through currently, and many, many things. He has a wonderful website.
I think what makes these evenings so special is I was looking over at people were saying, I've never heard of him, and I've never, known anything about him, and how wonderful it is that we can have an opportunity to just kind of get to know new people and people that have never been introduced to us before. I've been around knowing about Mark Nepo, but never really appreciated him till tonight, to be quite frank with you. And because I didn't know in the depth. I know that we gave the book that you have to read, and I know that I read it, and it was the 7,000. It felt like 7,000. I mean, it was a lot. But tonight, for some reason, it's the simplicity always that I go, wow, this is so simple. This is so delicious. This is so easy to understand. And so I thank you for that. And I also just think these evenings are very important so we can get to know and what's going on in our world with all these wonderful geniuses that are presenting himself. And he's one in the many, many, right? Thank you that was my first quote. I've never been quoted in
You've gone down into history now. You've been quoted. 7,000 Ways to Listen is the name of that book. And, why 7,000? Well, a linguist told him, he was in Africa, and a linguist there said, literally, there are at least 7,000 languages in the world. Now, the rest of us would probably think, well, maybe I could think of 20 or 50 or whatever. But when you're talking about all of the small groups all over the world and locations that we don't know in the different dialects, there are 7,000 ways to speak. So he says, why can't we learn how to listen in 7,000 ways as well as speak in 7,000 ways? Mr. Charles.
He spoke of his meditations as well as some of the different interactions that he had with strangers and folks while he was going through his battle with cancer. Is there any way that you can go into any more detail about what he did as far as his meditations or some of the conversations or things that were life-changing for him in those interactions with strangers?
I can't really say for him, but I think he went on a journey that many people with serious diagnoses have gone on. And it was the journey that he knew he had to go within and probably do a lot of forgiveness work. That's one thing. I do know, I've read that his relationship with his parents was not always good. In fact, for several years, they did not speak. And for whatever reasons, who knows? But when you have those kinds of difficult challenges in your life, I think that the first thing to do is to, of course, look at it and then maybe get to the place where you can let go, forgive, and know that everything in the past is what made us what we are today. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah, and Rita, be right back.
And maybe you already said it, and if I missed it, I'm sorry. But did you say how you became acquainted and so enamored with him? Like, I know you're a big Emerson fan, and I can, if I ever need an Emerson, I go to you. But when did you become acquainted with him, and and what that made you want to do this? Because you volunteered to do him, so.
I did volunteer to do him. Well, when I was, a few years ago when I was much younger, I went through a practitioner training classes, and our assignment was to read 7,000 Ways to Listen. And so it was from my amazing teachers, the Reverends, which if you've taken classes from them, you know, I'm not just saying this for brownie points, because I get no brownie points. I'm saying this because I've been around the block for a lot of years of taking classes, and they are two of the best instructors. And those of you, I see a lot of people nodding, you've taken classes from them. They are really, really inspiring and really very good. So that book was scheduled for us to read, and I really enjoyed it. But what I enjoy more than reading this kind of thing, and this is not a plug necessarily for Audible. I'm sure that there are other apps that you can listen to books on through those devices, or books on tape, what they used to be called. But I find that so wonderful. I do that a lot now, and listening to Mark Nepo's voice before I go to bed, and he's talking to me in that gentle voice and telling me just those sweet phrases. It's very nice. I would recommend it. And although my husband has sweet phrases for me too. I thought I'd better say that, Michelle. He may cut off the tape right there. He happens to be that man behind the camera. Oh, yeah.
In answer to your question, and I'm not sure if it's the Endless Practice or the Book of Awakening, he talks of his journey of the cancer experience and the need, I think, and also to quote Reverend Patrick, it's It's your own it's your own journey. Ultimately, you're here with your own decisions, your own life, and it's up to you to get to that place of oneness that'll heal all things. And that's, I think, why he discovered, I think he talked about it a little bit in the beginning, about he went into many practices. And anyone who goes into any practices, whether it was years ago when I saw Wayne Dyer at Unity in Maui, I'm sure eventually Mark will get here. And it would be a great honor to see him.
Great. So if you don't have anything else to add, I would just like to close us out. Yes, I did announce that, but there is a reminder. Yes, thank you. A reminder. The $27, his latest book, hardcover, $27, is now on sale tonight only. Can't buy it from us tomorrow for $20. It's $20 tonight only. And I haven't read this one, although I've read quotes from it, but it was just published. But I really like the idea behind this one, because as we go into learning more and more what we can do as a community, the cameraman is giving me directions. More together than alone, discovering the power and spirit of community in our lives and in the world. And I think many of us have been frustrated about whatever goes on in the world, whether it's the environment or other issues facing all of us as one people in this world, that we are all connected. So how can we take our energy and not just complain about things, but how can we move forward and do something as a community? So I think this is very timely. So in closing, I'm just going, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for bringing forth poetry here, because I have forgotten how powerful fewer words are. And I would guess that, like me, there are others in this room who have written poetry in the past, and it's so far in my past that I go, okay, I feel inspired to play around with it again. And, and especially after I wrote a blog today, and it's a lot of words. It's a heck of a lot of words when fewer words have bigger feelings, I think. Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate that thought. I would suggest, having had a degree in English literature, having done some writing in my life, and what I do know, to be succinct is much harder than just to go rambling on and on and on. To cut your writing down, that's a challenge. And to cut it down, all of your thoughts that are going on, and then to cut it down into some simple phrase and some short poem and express so much. That takes a lot of practice and a lot of effort. But
people always used to ask me, what is an artist? And it doesn't matter whether it's a singer, a painter, a poet. When things are flowing from the inside of your being out so naturally that it, like he said earlier, it doesn't matter if you're feeling bad or whatever, the sun's going to shine. The birds are going to sing, even if you can't hear them. And all of this, the reason why I use the word innate, because when I would judge art, what would go in my gallery, what wouldn't go in my gallery, I wanted the artist who was so prolific, who had to create, who didn't care what the weather was like or if the kids were screaming. And I used to always tell them this story of who I bought the art gallery from. And it was a woman with 5 or 6 kids, a single mom. And she'd sit in front of the TV, the kids would be all over the place, and she'd have her easel in front of her. She was compelled to create. To me, a true artist is one, it's of nature. So when I used to challenge my husband to write a poem on the spot, it would flow from within. To me, that is an artist.
Thank you. Okay, so if you just want to settle back into your chairs, and I'm just doing what we call a benediction, and just saying mahalo. Mahalo for this opportunity to share Mark Nepo with each of you, and for all of the thoughts that have been expressed here tonight. And I know we take these words with us. We take them because if they've touched anything deep, any of these words, if they've touched something deep and something that you can treasure in your life, please just take it with you and think about it and keep it close to you. And knowing that this evening has been special, and I believe that each one of you has added to it. So I just want to say, as we go out tonight, that carry those beautiful thoughts with each of you when you go. And so, again, grateful for Mark Nepos in the world, grateful for CSL, grateful for all of us that come together. I release my word into that law, as we say together. And so it is. By the way, I do have some sheets